Plastic Man goes body horror. Does it work? Let's discuss. Plastic Man No More is a 4-issue Black Label miniseries. It's being written by Christopher Cantwell with art by Alex Linz, and also for issue 1 at least, Jacob Edgar. There are various art styles in here, different techniques, as well as the artist shift to convey different tones. The series' tones concept was described by Cantwell thusly: Cronenberg-esque. He stated, "I don't know about you, but when I think about Plastic Man, I immediately think of David Cronenberg. There is an element of body horror to his story that I've always found fascinating." So from the outset, there was an interesting response to this announcement. Some were intrigued. Others felt that this moved Plastic Man off base, or it just wasn't a genre they were interested in seeing him in. Some wanted him to stay closer to his comedy roots. Although from inception, his adventures have also had their serious moments. And some felt that as a Black Label series, the tonal shift made sense. Although some also felt that Black Label doesn't have to mean dour and dark. The story was described as centering around Plastic Man's decay, with Cantwell stating, "I also found myself wondering recently, how would Plastic Man actually die? What would that look like? Is he immortal? And then I thought of the long and particularly nasty way real plastics and petroleum products break down when and if they finally do. That's how I learned about depolymerization and the chemical process of unzipping. From a particularly morose afternoon on the old internet, picturing what might happen to Eel if his entire cellular structure started to give way." And so that's exactly what this story is about. But it also appears to be going to have a strong emphasis as a character study on Eel O'Brian, taking him through a journey of his life and history to examine whether or not he is a good person, his relationship with the Justice League, with his son, and with heroism in general. So a lot of how one receives this is going to ride or die upon how one receives the characterization, as well as the more grotesque elements. Plastic Man is quite literally melting and having to keep parts of himself in buckets. Although so far, this is issue 1, we haven't gone full Cronenberg yet, although there are definitely some fly elements that if one has seen that film, they may notice. I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and let's discuss issue 1. Since we're so close to release time for recording, spoilers. The story opens in the past, when Eel was still a criminal. He's seen here working alongside Woozie Winks. This is a deep-ish cut, although Woozie has been brought forward. Woozie debuted in the Golden Age. He was a comedy sidekick for Plastic Man, who debuted in Police Comics number 13. This back when Plastic Man was still being published by Quality Comics, before many of the characters had been acquired by DC. Since he debuted in Police Comics issue 13, this was well after Police Comics number 1, where Plastic Man debuted in 1941, where his criminal history was already given. So while him being there is a nod, this them pulling crimes together is something that's been added. It's not a bad extrapolation though, because when they originally met, Woozie was a small-time criminal at the start, and Plastic Man goes undercover as Eel O'Brian to get close to him. This could also be an Earth 12 reference. Basically, it's just that this isn't coming from nowhere. This opening sequence is given to show Plas's personality pre-transformation. And it's going to show that he's not the nicest person. He's bitter and judgmental. He's envious of what other people have. He's quick to look at others and feel that they don't deserve what they have. Some people got it way too easy. You sound angry. Nope, I think it's hilarious. Denny and my friend, why aren't you laughing? 'Cause Woozie, I'm the punchline. Oi, DC already has a punchline. So right there you're getting a taste of Plastic Man's outlook and the idea that his humor is largely a front, that it's used as a projection to hide his actual feelings, which are quite dark. Now this robbery goes wrong because he wants to get something nice for his girl, Angel, but he wants it to be this specific thing that he saw when he was casing the store, and so when it's not there, he goes berserk, even though he's robbing the place. So there's a sense of entitlement being shown there. All of this is setting up the base of Plastic Man without his heroism and family as not great. It's showcasing that there was a decent amount of redeeming to be done, because part of Plastic Man's story since his inception was a redemption arc. Well, I'll be Patrick O'Brien. Slick as Neil, is that right? This little exchange is noteworthy because it helps solidify his nickname, or rather explain it, because that expression, slick as Neil, is not exactly common parlance time of recording. It's an expression that's kind of fallen out of usage. You certainly don't hear it every day. This leads to a montage of him getting his powers, and that origin has gotten more dramatic over the years. In his original Quality one, he got shot and some acid fell on him and it got into him and it got into his blood, and that's how he transformed. Over time, it's become almost a version of the Joker's origin where he falls into a full vat of acid, then later chemicals as it just evolves. The New 52 brought it closer to base, but upped the horror factor. Our present in this comic is given as 20 years later, and we have a different art style for the present day on the Justice League. They're drawn in a Darwin Cook-esque ode to the Golden Age. They're brighter, they have these harder lines. It's all meant to convey a different tone. As Plastic Man's sections we saw at the start were looser, and some of the faces even had a Riley Rossmo thing going on at points. In these sequences, Plastic Man is more the version that people are accustomed to. He's joking, he seems happy to help, but he finds himself shaken when he's actually hurt by the vaporizer ray. No kidding, well done. I prefer myself more medium rare. Hilarious. Wow, we wish I'd worn higher SPF. Plastic Man, you're too much. Yeah, I mean it though. Ow. It really hurts. The depiction of the Justice League is not the most favorable in this, though there could be a couple of reasons for this. One could be because a lot of this is through Plastic Man's perspective, so it may be his perception of the League, and so it may be more played up in his mind than how he's actually being treated. Because on the panel, we see them after this incident playing with children, the Flash looks like he's talking with a nun, or it could actually be that they are this way and they're trying to depict the kind of cliquish element that could be present in the Justice League, that there are certain people who are in and certain people who are more on the outside, that there's some elitism in the League. While the latter would make sense and is an interesting idea to explore, for some it's not a depiction they appreciate. Not everyone wants the Just Us League, and they may feel it makes the characters seem a bit less heroic. You know who really doesn't appreciate it though? This version of Plastic Man. Yeah, I really am too much. You know what you are, Diana? Snot. Yeah, why don't you ask your lasso? And Hal needs to be some kind of handsome green god. Wait, Hal needs to be some kind of handsome green god? Even when insulting, he's like, ugh, he's so handsome, stupid, sexy Hal Jordan. You have no new voicemail messages, which Superman doesn't like because he's supposed to be God. I have to say, I do like the callback to the fact that for a time period, there was a bit of antagonism between Green Lantern and Superman. They've dropped it. It was interesting though. Also, Superman didn't get the handsome description. He's just a regular god, not a handsome one. Barry's a jock. Bills, bills, bills. Wonderful, more bills. Ugh, Arthur smells like the worst section of the grocery store. Great, no OJ. Batman is, he's just really cool. He's actually very cool. Just a very cool looking guy. Not as handsome as Hal though, apparently. I was not expecting a Hal Jordan moment in this. It's from here that the body horror starts to pick up. Because rather than healing, Plastic Man is melting. And you saw that start to be conveyed through the lettering. His lettering was melting. It was a nice little detail. His reaction to it makes it more horrific, which is that he just instantly adapts to it. He gets a plastic bag and puts it on. It plays into the idea of just the inevitability of what's happening to him, that there's nothing he can do and he just is trying to hide it / deal with it. There's just something very chilling about that. In ways, it's more uncomfortable than if he had freaked out about it. That also has some Fly elements to it, because you see that in the 1980s version. It's just happening and getting worse and worse. Now, Plastic Man does try and tell the Justice League, and they very much ignore him, and the use of letterboxes literally overlaid over top of his, cutting him off, is an excellent use of visual storytelling. However, at the behest of Detective Chimp, Batman does reach out to help him, and so he gives him a card to Wayne Enterprises to get help there. He gets to go see a scientist, and from this scientist, he learns that he is depolymerizing, that he's dying. I'm dying. Hilarious. That little moment is a nice callback to the beginning of the story to show that he hasn't changed. He still has the same outlook, despite everything that's happened to him. Plastic Man, now confronted with his mortality, is forced to examine his life. Gotta change out the bag again, but I don't want to throw any of myself away. All the same, what's worth keeping? The sequence where he muses on his life and we see many positive moments but undercut with his own negative inner voice is quite effective. Oh wow, he's just like his old man. Freak. It's a good demonstration of how one's own thoughts can color events in their life, the perception of them, and how what's happening could appear different to others, but when it's overlaid with his own inner voice, it takes on a different cadence. We also get to see these moments, these thoughts of himself start to impact his life, impact his actions, and then they start to manifest because they're what he believes. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The use of his melting body to encase all of this is a stark visual, and it also could serve to represent how his powers have impacted his life and continue to do so. It's also gross. It takes Plastic Man a moment to think about the fact that this may mean that because his son inherited his abilities, then this could happen to him. This adds a bit of a sins of the father layer to everything that's going on, because it was through his own criminal actions that he got these powers, but now the consequences for that may also trickle down generationally. This makes Plastic Man want to get up and search for a cure, which he does, and also there's a little thing about how bits of him are now around the city. And that's the crux of this first issue, which ends with Plastic Man having a bit of a plan of action. Now this has a lot of strengths, but also some areas where it may not resonate with everyone. The elements that Cantwell wanted to emphasize come out well. There's a strong focus on the inevitability of decline and the horror of being forced to watch oneself come apart, which could be viewed as a musing on degenerative illness, or for some of the less dramatic but equally terrifying and inevitable march of time, aging. The ride you only get off one way. He stated, "There are many superhero stories that play with the metaphor of our own inability to control our physical bodies. Plastic Man provided a way to take that allegory even deeper. How we look in the mirror and see one thing, then see a photo of ourselves and don't recognize the person at all. How we all break down over time. What's this strange itch? Why is this sagging? Why is this hurt now? Is my face permanently going to look like this? Or get even worse?" With all these questions in the story comes a real and profound fear of aging, and yes, what lies beyond that, dying. I saved that quote to the end for a reason, to emphasize the fact that even without that, those elements come through in the story. You don't need to have heard that to grasp what's going on. But at the same time, the metaphor isn't overtaking the story. It's more bolstering it. Using Plastic Man to explore these concepts is interesting, as his power set does lend itself nicely to many of these horror elements. The question for some will be whether his character suits the arc he's going through in this. The things that are being depicted about Plastic Man don't really contradict anything in his history. They're also not things that one couldn't infer. Like him being a poor father is not an addition. It's a direct lift from the 2000s JLA era. Really, nothing in this was ungrounded. And the changes that are made, such as things with Woozy, are fairly subtle. However, what some may rankle at is the fact that Plastic Man himself isn't the most likable protagonist. The happy-go-lucky joke-cracking Plas is presented as a facade, a front, and underneath is a self-loathing, bitter, and at times selfish person, which may just not be what some want for this character. Or it may feel like too far of a shift off base from what some are familiar with. The character work that is presented does work quite well in terms of realism and just the way Plastic Man talks and his inner voice, but for some it won't be Plastic Man. While for others they may feel that this is a Black Label book, it's its own thing, and a place to examine the character a little differently. Some may also feel that these elements were already lurking there in the character to be explored. Let me know your thoughts. I'm curious what you think. The use of different art styles and techniques in this work was well done, particularly in the transitions between the League scenes and Plastic Man's life, and there were some creative lettering and background choices that enhanced the sequences they were utilized for. The background fading out for Plastic Man's talk with his son forces you to focus in on them, for the world itself is faded out. It makes the reader focus on the conversation, but also highlights the importance of it to the characters. However, the horror elements, in my opinion, this is a Miles Ferry's moment, could have gone a bit harder, particularly as this is a Black Label work. This isn't about the idea of adding gore for gore's sake, but perhaps just a bit more detail on what was there, or some darker coloring in some of Plastic Man's sections, just to add to that oppressive atmosphere of despair and dread. Although it is just issue 1, that could be coming. Maybe by the end the pages will just be melting. As it is, it was a strong presentation. That would just have been some icing. Especially when one advertises the work as body horror. Let's get gross. He has to drink himself back from the bucket to stay together. For some that may be too much. That's why I say Miles Ferris. This was a very strong first issue with lots of nods to lore, compelling artistic choices, and strong storytelling in what could turn out to be quite a poignant mini. We'll see. It's also one that will most likely not be to everyone's taste. This worked for me, but I want to hear if it worked for you. If yes, if no, I want to hear why. Please put all your thoughts down below. And while you're down there, please do all YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notifications so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.